Wait. Wild Bill? Yeah, I know him. I mean, he went 25-4 for the Tigers in 1907, from the year they won the first AL pennant. What? Oh, a different guy? Huh. February 22nd, 1941. You're a military leader. A force under your command has made a fairly rapid advance for a few days and takes a major prize. So what do you do then? If you're Alan Cunningham, you say, let's advance another 1,000 miles. Let's advance 500 miles, and let's advance 500 more. I'm Indy Neidell. This is World War II. Last week, Operation Compass, the hugely successful British drive against the Italians across North Africa, came to an end. It had reached El Agheila and destroyed the Italian 10th Army, and now much of its force will be sent to Greece to defend against any German invasion there. Germany, meanwhile, sent reinforcements under Erwin Rommel down to Tripoli. There was fighting in both Eritrea and Italian Somaliland, and the first ever British airborne operation. Action continues in East Africa this week. On the 16th, the 1st South African Brigade starts fighting to take the crossings of the river Juba. This is actually pretty important. The Juba is Italian Somaliland's main river. The Juba's world is a world of its own, a belt of palm and green luxuriance many hundred miles long and anything from a few hundred yards to a few miles breadth. It is easily Italian Somaliland's best natural defense, and you can be damn sure this is where the Italians are going to defend. The battle for Lower Jubaland was over last week, but for the rest of Somaliland, it is about to begin, and Djellab is the first focus for that. A frontal assault has pretty poor chances of success, and the Italian artillery there is pretty good. So the Gold Coast Brigade, and that South African brigade I mentioned, probe for other river crossings, and find them they do, at Yonte, 20 kilometers north of Gobwen, and Mbungo, 50 north of Djellab. So they make crossings and advance up and down the east side of the Juba towards Djellab, while the 22nd East African Brigade powers through the bush and manages to cut the Mogadishu road behind Djellab. And the speed and unexpectedness of this whole operation just crumbles Italian resistance. Djellab falls to 22nd. This marks a change in the campaign, for Alan Cunningham, in charge, now thinks his troops can make it all the way to Harar, 1,600 kilometers, 1,000 miles away. And he gets Archie Wavell's okay. Wavell is in charge of the Middle Eastern and African theater of operations. It also really helps Cunningham that the South African Air Force has forced the Italian Air Force to limit its attacks to night bombing raids, so daytime advancing is finally possible. Also in the general area, which is a really big general area, on the 18th, South African forces moving from Kenya take Mega and 1,000 prisoners. And on the 19th, Emperor Haile Selassie, brought back to Abyssinia in January to help organize resistance against the Italians, arrives in Dangila with Ord Wingate's Gideon force. They will spend the next couple weeks harassing the Italians with a fair amount of success. Wavell and Cunningham actually meet each other in person this week. On the 19th, British Foreign Secretary Anthony Eden, Chief of the Imperial General Staff John Dill, Wavell and Cunningham meet in Cairo to talk about how much help they can and are willing to send to Greece. On the 23rd, tomorrow, the Greeks say that they will accept a force that at this stage is 100,000 men strong, plus artillery and armor support. 4 divisions to beef up the 18 Greek ones on the northern frontier. They will not accept less, because fewer units would not be able to fight off the Germans if and when they attack, and would likely only encourage them to attack. They also talk about disposition. The British prefer along the line of the Aliakmon River, but the Greeks don't want to give up the territory the line excludes. No decision is made at this point. Thing is, on the 17th, Bulgaria and Turkey sign a friendship agreement. The Turks are worried about both German and Soviet territorial designs, and they have their own territorial designs on Greece. Under German pressure, Turkey and Bulgaria sign a friendship agreement by which Turkey accepts that the movement of German troops through Bulgaria is not an act of war. This more or less confirms that there is no possibility of Turkey being persuaded to ally with Britain. How about this? In spite of endless efforts, projects, schemes, and hopes on the part of the British, they were not about to join any front against Germany until the Germans themselves invaded Turkey, something the Germans naturally promised they would never do, and something they equally naturally planned for the moment it was safe for them to do so. In offering portions of Greece to Bulgaria and Yugoslavia, the Germans were careful to exclude that portion of Greece bordering on Turkey. Here was bait to dangle before Ankara's eyes. Hitler has decided that Operation Marita will not just be to secure strategic positions in Greece, for the Luftwaffe to try to dominate the Eastern Mediterranean and the Eastern Aegean. He's going to go for a straight-out occupation of Greece. He was not prepared to risk the opening of another Salonika front, from which Britain with France, well, actually it was the five-nation Allied Army of the Orient, had harried Germany's southern flank of operations in 1916 to 1918. Here, as so often elsewhere in his conduct of the Second World War, Hitler's strategic calculations were influenced by his experience and memories of the First, in which he had fought as a common soldier. Hitler has been recently stymied in his plans for the Western Mediterranean by Franco's Spain and Pétain's France not making an anti-British alliance with him, but he's still kind of free to maybe operate in the Eastern Mediterranean, like the Central Powers had in World War I with Ottoman help. I mean, if he can talk the Vichy French leadership in Syria and Lebanon to take German military aid, then, you know, he could base Luftwaffe units there that could strike the Suez Canal or the Iraqi oil fields. Now, Iraq is a sovereign state, though until 1932, it had been a British mandate. But the Nationalist Party there is pro-German, and though Hitler does not have direct contact with them, he can likely count on them to complicate Britain's control of the Middle East anyhow. The Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Mohammed Amin al-Husseini, though appointed to his position during the British Mandate of Palestine 2 decades ago, is an anti-British, anti-Zionist, pro-German Arab nationalist. That is only going to work to Hitler's advantage in the region. Okay, any such advantage is not the kind that needs an investment of big force, if Hitler is ever in such a position to send such a force. But Greece is different. Britain getting involved there is a direct, frontal challenge to Hitler's military control of the European continent. And, even if the British have no idea, it threatens the overall development of his future campaign against the USSR. So he has to destroy that challenge completely. But doing that has a couple of deployment problems. I mean, where will the attack come from? Albania is completely full of Italian troops at the moment, and you can only get there by sea or by air anyhow. Bulgaria's transit system, roads, railways, and bridges, it's not very extensive, and it's fairly primitive anyhow, so not good for any rapid deployment. What Hitler will need is something like the southern Yugoslavian railway system, and then he can attack from Monastir and down the Vardar. The problem with that is that for several months now, Yugoslavian Prince Regent Paul has been resisting German pressure to sign the Tripartite Pact and join the Axis powers, and it has been heavy pressure. But Prince Paul is an Oxford-educated Anglophile who has not hidden his sympathies, and it also does not help Hitler that Paul's wife is a Greek princess. So why should he help invade Greece for Germany? Well, he keeps telling Germany the Balkans should be a neutral zone in the war, but all the countries around him are slowly filling up with German troops. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill and Wild Bill Donovan, American President Franklin Roosevelt's emissary to Belgrade, have been pressuring Paul to rebuff the Axis advances. But for how long can he do that? It seems everyone's thinking of plans and possibilities this week. Husband Kimmel, Commander-in-Chief of the American Pacific Fleet, writes to Harold Stark, American Chief of Naval Operations, "I feel that a surprise attack, submarine, air, or combined, on Pearl Harbor is a possibility, and we're taking immediate practical steps to minimize the damage inflicted and to ensure that the attacking force will pay." Soviet General Pavlov, who commands the Western Military District, wires Stalin, Molotov, and Marshal Timoshenko, asking for serious funds for building roads. He warns that the USSR's Western theater of operations must be organized now in 1941. Stalin replies that he understands that is a legitimate concern, but the country is not in a position to do what Pavlov asks. And here's a side note to end the week. On the 16th, Hans Gunther turns 50 and is celebrated by the Nazis. Who is Gunther? He's the main ideologist of Nazi racial policy, even known as the Race Pope, Rassenpaps. Gunther joined the Nazis before their takeover of Germany, and in his 1929 book on German ethnology, described non-European Jews as fomenters of disintegration of Nordic culture. He is awarded the Goethe Medal for his birthday. And that was this week of the war, a week of big successes for the Commonwealth forces in Italian Somaliland, and a week of a whole bunch of plans for the immediate future of Greece, plans that seem to affect just about everywhere else. They do, you know. I mean, Bulgaria and Turkey signed papers this week, so the Germans can basically occupy Bulgaria. Turkey is hoping to head off that eventuality for itself. Yugoslavia is worried about its future vis-a-vis the Germans, and with good reason. Britain has stripped North Africa pretty bare for Greece, but that may have serious repercussions there since Germany is sending forces to Africa. The Soviet Union watches on suspiciously with its own territorial designs in southern Europe. You see, wheels within wheels. It's all interconnected. That is modern war. If you'd like to see an episode about some pre-war developments in Yugoslavia, you can click here for one of our Between Two Wars episodes about it. Right there. Any minute. Soon. Our TimeGhost Army member of the week is Owen Evans. Our Army's support on Patreon is what finances this show, so join Owen at patreon.com or timeghost.tv. Do not forget to subscribe so you can keep seeing all of this fascinating and fantastic content, and ring that bell. That's really why I have that there, isn't it? They just started putting it there a few weeks ago, but it's a good bell. Isn't that right? Alabama! Okay, see you next time.